Hello everyone, this is Kelly and I'd like to welcome you back to the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel and a product spotlight for our cozy Christmas release. Today's video is featuring the Believe in the Magic stamps and dies. First, let's take a look at the stamp set. So we have this beautiful ornate snow globe. And then lots of mix and match sentiments. Some you'll see here are more oval shaped to fit inside the little oval on the snow globe. And then lots of mix and match things that you can add with those words that are more oval shaped. So for example, peace to you and yours, believe in the magic of Christmas, and so on. Next, let's take a look at a graphic that you may see on our website. So we like to show our dies in the red line. So that's exactly where those dies are going to cut. And we show the images so you can see exactly what can go inside. For example, like the sentiment dies in the magic there, it's going to show you which die is going to cut that out. The Noel, the snow globe, and so on. Now, when we receive our dies in our packaging, this is what they're going to come to you and look like. So they're not going to have the words inside or the stamped images inside. It's just going to be the package of dies. Now, let's start stamping. I am going to stamp the beautiful, ornate little cozy snow globe onto some watercolor paper. Now, I love that these more oval shaped words can fit inside that little oval. There's a couple of dies in the set that you can use to layer and cut those out and add some dimension if you like to. But because I'm doing this watercolor, I'm going to stamp it in the VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it is water safe. And then I'm going to play with some watercolor markers, the Tombow watercolor markers. This is something I like to do. It's going to give it kind of a more kind of faux watercolor look. We're going to pretend, or I'm going to pretend like I can watercolor. So I am prepping that large snow globe stamp. First, I ran my fingers over it and then a little stamp eraser that's going to take off any of the leftover residue that is left on our stamps when they are being manufactured. Now, because this is a big, bold, large stamp, I am inking this up and I am going to apply a lot of pressure. Now, that watercolor paper is lumpy and bumpy, so I'm going to need to go over this a few times to make sure that that ink gets nicely stamped onto that paper. And I want to make sure that it gets into all the little crevices of that watercolor paper. Now, when I have that all done, I'm going to take my heat tool and make sure that this VersaFine Onyx Black ink, the watercolor ink, is all nicely set. I want to make sure it's good and dry. That way, when I take water to it or ink to it, it doesn't bleed out and then mix and match with the inks that I'm going to be adding into this image. So once I have this all nice and set, I can grab my markers and we'll be ready to go. Now, one thing I like to do when choosing the shades of Copic markers, or in this case, the Tombow markers to do a kind of watercolor look, I like to match my pattern paper because I'm going to use one of these patterns as a background behind my snow globe. And so I am going to choose something. So I really like this snowy scene. And then we have beautiful poinsettias. I'm really liking this navy blue with this subtle little greenery pieces. That one is too green. The one with the cute little stamps may be too busy. The plaid would be perfect. The holly. I love these little scenes with the little houses and stuff, which would go perfectly with the little house in the snow globe. And I ended up choosing this really sweet little navy paper that has the little red berries and a little bit of greenery. So that is what I'm going to base the colors that I choose to watercolor on. So there is kind of this teal turquoise color. And I like to leave a little bit of the excess paper. So you'll see all the excess watercolor paper up there because that's where I'm going to test my markers to see how they're going to react with the water. And so some of this I'm going to scribble directly onto my glass mat and I can pick up with a red brush or a wet brush, excuse me, And then others, you will notice I'm going to take the marker directly to the paper. And it kind of depends on what I want it to look like. And I cannot get my crazy curly hair to behave here, so I can get really far down there by my desk. I want to make sure that I stay inside the lines there. But in some of these areas, I'm going to pick the pigment up directly off of the glass mat with a damp brush. Just kind of scribble it into where I have scribbled on that pigment, and then I can take it to the paper. And you'll notice that when I'm doing it this way, it seems to be very light colored or lightly colored because the water is going to dilute that pigment and then I can add it on. Now, in spaces that I want it to look very watercolory, almost a little blotchy, I can dry it because I want to dry between my layers, and then I can go back over it usually by scribbling onto my glass mat. That is the easiest way for me to control where everything is going. If you take your marker directly to the paper, you are going to have kind of a harsh line where you lay that marker down. For example, look up there where I have scribbled down the teal marker. You can see exactly where I scribbled it into place, and then the lighter shade is where I used the water with my brush to dilute it down and then drag it out. So in some places you may want it more deep and dark like that. For example, I'm going to do that here in just a minute with the red of the little cottage. And I can take the marker directly under the roof line, and that's going to add a little bit of a shadowed or a deeper area of the red. And then I can simply drag that color out with my wet brush. So I love this kind of turquoisey, moody teal so much that I am using it for the cute little trees. And you see, I took the marker directly to the tips of those trees, and then I am pulling it out. And I can kind of add it in, splotch it in. I wasn't happy with that, so I'm going directly to my glass mat and then picking it up with a damp brush, and then I'm able to control where I add my little splotches here and there. Now for these little trees on the left side, I took clean water, added to the tree, and then I'm just going to drop in ink, and you're going to see it's going to be extremely light. So I'm going to layer and layer on that pigment until I get it exactly the way I want it, leaving the tips or the tops of these trees a little bit darker, add a little shadowing on one side, and just having a lot of fun playing with my inks and my brushes and my markers. Now, I have scribbled on a gold, and I'm going to test these. I want to do the little flourishes in that snow globe in a gold color. So I've scribbled them down. I'm going to pull them out to see how they react with the water. And these I'm just not real crazy about. So I'm going to keep testing markers until I get the shade that I want. But that's exactly why I test it on my paper up there instead of taking the marker or taking the pigment directly to the stamped image, is then I know exactly the shade that I'm getting because I've tested them all up there at the top. So I'm going to wet these areas, some of the little flourishes, with a wet brush with clean water, and then I'm going to scribble down some of the gold marker, pick it up with my damp brush, and then just kind of drop it in. Now, once I got all of the gold flourishes all done and just kind of experimenting, whether I took a wet brush and added the water down first or taking the pigment directly off the glass mat, it's kind of fun to play around and see what we get. Now, I did end up adding that teal color into the oval on the snow globe because I'm going to end up heat embossing one of those oval sentiments into that little oval. Now I'm taking a much lighter yellow here, and you can see I'm adding the marker directly to the paper. It's a very, very light yellow, just to give those little windows just a little bit of a warm glow, like we have some candles inside or some lamp light or something in our cozy little cottage. And I'm just going to smooth that out where I have dropped or use the marker directly on the watercolor paper just to make sure that everything is nice, neat, and smooth. So the next color that I am going to choose is a red for our little cottage. And so I've scribbled it down. I like the way that that color is looking. It looks really good with that pattern paper that I have picked out because it's going to pull out the red in the little berries. And here's where I'm taking that marker directly under the roof line because as I mentioned before, wherever you draw or color with your marker, you are going to be um, dropping down a lot of pigment, and that line is not totally going to go away. But I don't mind it in this spot because it's going to look like a little deeper, darker shadowing, a little darker of that red shade right underneath the roof line, and then the rest of it I can just kind of pull down, and you'll see me work my damp brush down to really get that red color moving so I can go all the way down to the bottom of this little cottage and not add any more pigment. Next, I needed to choose a brown, and so I'm just going to scribble on some browns here. I like that one. I'm going to add a little bit direct from the marker right up there at the tippy top of the pitch of the roof line, and then I'm going to use a damp brush just to pull that down on my little roof line. Now you'll notice that I did the snowy parts, the ground and the snowflakes, and I'm going to do the same thing to the snow on the roof here in just a minute. But I'm using the same turquoise as I did on the snow globe base and the trees. I'm just trying to do it in much lighter application than I did on the rest of it. So we kind of get the snowy look. You'll see there on the ground towards the bottom of the circle of the snow globe where I left some of that white, and I did that just so you get the blue feeling of snow, but you're not leaving it just a stark white color. Now I took my blue or turquoise marker, drug it across my glass mat, and then I'm just going to pick up little bits and kind of just dab a little bit on the snowy roof line and just kind of spread that out until I'm happy with how that looks. And I did go in and color in the little snowballs or the little snowy flakes that are falling around our little cottage and did that as well. Now for the glass that is surrounding our snow globe. I want a really, really pale gray. Now I could leave this just all white and not do anything to it, but I wanted it to look and give the feel of glass. So I am tracing right around the edge of the snow globe with a really, really pale gray. And then I'm going to use my damp brush and just kind of drag out that color and kind of go in and around and weave throughout those little snowflakes and then just kind of pull that out. And it's going to give me the look of a cloudy winter sky. And it's also going to add with that darker line right around the edge, it's going to add to the look of the glass. And so I'm just going to use my damp brush and start pulling this out carefully to avoid all of the little snowflakes and everything like that. And I love how this pale gray, it almost, it gives me those little watercolor blotchy spots like we all love. Um, and so I am going in and adding darker here and there. I had scribbled it on the glass mat because I don't want to take my marker to it again because again, that's going to add um, darker little marker spots where like I've tried to color it in. I don't want that. I want on these more open spots around those little snowflakes to just be drops of cloudy watercolor, for lack of a better word. So that's why I'm picking up that pigment off the glass mat, and then I can kind of control that better on where I drop it in. Now I love how this is looking like kind of a cloudy winter sky, and it, because I took the marker right around the edge, it kind of highlighted where we get those little glassy marks there. Now, once I get this all finished, I'm going to heat set it really well before I do anything else. And I use the coordinating dies to cut out our snow globe. And then I stamped and heat embossed peace in the little oval. So you could choose any of those little oval shaped words. They would fit in there. You could stamp that on another piece of paper and die cut it and pop it up. but I just chose to go with the little gold theme that I had going on with the little flourishes, and I added the gold embossing powder over the top. Now, I wanted to see if my dyed seam binding would coordinate with the paper and the little house on our snow globe, and it does. So I'm going to tie a little crinkly bow around the base or around the center of a snow globe where the glass connects to the base, just to add kind of a fun little touch there. And I have chosen the little sub sentiment to you and yours because that's perfectly going to go with the piece that's in the oval on our snow globe. I'm going to set this up in my MISTI just with a piece of white scrap paper. I can stamp this down and get a nice, clean, crisp sentiment. And then I'm going to make sure that I heat set this ink really well before I die cut it with the coordinating dies. And then I can add my sentiment right there on the snow globe, and this card is going to be all finished. So let's take a look at the finished card. So you can see that beautiful pattern paper that I kind of designed all the color scheme around, those sweet little pieces of greenery and berries and the navy blue. And now I popped this all on a card base that matches the turquoise markers that we used. I tied my sweet little Christmas ribbon, and then of course we have the beautiful piece to you and your sentiment there in the center of our snow globe. Thanks for joining me on this product spotlight. All of these products will be available on October 28th. Make sure you check out the description box below for all the details. Bye-bye.